Many people are surmising, Pepe, that Trump's foreign policy is being driven by more established members of this ruling class, like Lindsey Graham. And he was recently on Fox News. Here is Lindsey Graham's diatribe.
To recreate the former Soviet Union, the Russian Empire. He wants to take countries that are not his. In the mid-90s, Ukraine gave up 1,700 nuclear weapons with a promise that their sovereignty would be respected by Russia. Putin broke that promise. He's not going to stop until somebody makes him stop. So Trump has been tough on Iran, who is incredibly dangerous, but they're in a weakened state. And Putin, your turn is coming. You know, Donald Trump is the Scotty Scheffler of American politics and foreign diplomacy, and he's about to put a whooping on your ass. What's going to happen here is that Trump is going to impose tariffs on people that buy Russian oil. China, India, and Brazil, those three countries buy about 80% of cheap Russian oil. That's what keeps Putin's war machine going. So President Trump's going to put 100% tariff on all those countries, punishing them for helping Putin.
Pepe, this is the outline, essentially, of this war on BRICS. So maybe you can correct the record here.
First of all, this imbecile is not ruling class. He's paid by the ruling class. It's different. So he mouthed off what the ruling class tells him to do. Number one. Number two, this imbecile thinks that Brazil exports oil to the US. Well, I'll rest my case. It's total imbecility. He has no clue what he's talking about. And number two, Putin's empire, come on, read some history. Read the history of what's happening in Donbass since 2014 or even before. So it's pointless to give time and for imbeciles like that. You know, we're wasting our time. But that's the problem. And once again, I have to repeat that because this idiot is an American senator and he speaks English. Everything that he speaks gets international promotion and he goes in every bloody channel on the planet. If he was from Somalia or from Nigeria, this will never happen. So he's always lying and he's always mouthing off stupidity. So that's it. Don't take him into consideration. First of all, because he's irrelevant.
In your article, Pepe, you do talk about the RIC and how this war on BRICS that the ruling classes are actually waging has these components to it, these three components against the RIC. Talk about each one if you can. Could you lay out exactly what the landscape actually is? Because as you just noted, imbeciles like Lindsey Graham, they do a lot of obfuscating of the reality.
Well, you're being very diplomatic, Danny. Congratulations. I'm too old for this shit, so I'm not diplomatic anymore. Okay, RIC. Why I have been talking about RIC for months now, in fact. This is the original Primakov triangle, which was conceptualized by the late, great Russian foreign minister, Yevgeny Primakov, in the late 90s, when he qualified Russia, India, and China, RIC, as, let's say, the future of international relations, in fact. Nowadays, we can talk about a revamped Primakov triangle. The RIC would contain Iran and not India for an enormous number of reasons. First of all, because India, they still don't know exactly where they are. And something that I heard from some of the top Chinese academics in Rio, we had deep discussions day after day about BRICS. And some of them were saying, maybe we should start thinking in terms of the other two I's in BRICS. So BRICS, according to our Chinese friends, should take into consideration much more Iran and Indonesia instead of India. So this new Primakov triangle would be a Primakov quartet, in fact, with both Iran and Indonesia and Russia and China. Many of them were coming back to the same point, that the trust between India and China is broken. And the only possibility is if Russia steps in as mediator inside BRICS, inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and inside multilateral organizations as a whole, to more or less get Xi and Modi on the same table so they can finally patch up. It's going to be very, very difficult. The only ones who can pull that off are the Russians. But considering what happened in Rio, where India, even with some restrictions, in the end, they were following what Russia, China, and Brazil were dictating in terms of the roadmap for BRICS from now on. And very important, India they are the chair of BRICS next year. Summit's going to be in India next year. So the big question from now on until, let's say, next or October next year in India is how they are going to manage the fact that they are chair and the huge expectations and everything that was actually decided in terms of speeding up these BRICS, intra-BRICS interconnections for the next few months. So India, they have a lot on their plate and some serious decisions to make. Meanwhile, Iran and Indonesia, they are getting their place at the BRICS table is more and more solidified. The final declaration in Rio totally supported Iran in terms of the attack by Israel and by the US. This was a consensus, and the language was unmistakable. It might have been stronger, but the Brazilians were arguing with the Iranians. It cannot be too strong because then all red alerts will start popping up in DC. So they found a solution, and the Iranians agreed in the end. And when Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, when he intervened at the table, when they were all at the table, the first day of the meeting, Arakchi's condemnation was really hardcore, much more hardcore than and everybody understood why, and everybody understood why he was doing it at the table. It's on the record now, very important. But the RIC, the New Primakov Triangle or Quartet with Iran and Indonesia, they are leading BRICS now, from now on. And in terms of diversifying the world economy, in terms of trade in their own currencies, and in terms of very close interconnections, and considering the fact that they all have strategic relationships among themselves, not with Indonesia, but soon Indonesia will be part of it as well, it's very good for BRICS integration. Of course, the 2 or 3 IQs over room temperature in Washington who are actually paying attention to that adds to their desperation. Because every move on the hybrid war, hot war, trade war, tariff war against the BRICS only solidifies the BRICS even more. And solidifies them even to the point of finally this relatively dysfunctional organism, which is the NDB, the New Development Bank, the BRICS Bank, it's probably starting to get its act together. I had long conversations in Rio with Paulo Nogueira Batista, the Brazilian economist, who's one of the co-founders of the NDB. So Paulo knows inside out how the NDB works and doesn't work, especially. And of course, he knows how to fix it. The problem is this has to go through the top BRICS partners, members, sorry, not partners, and also the countries who are partners of the NDB. For the moment, there are only 10. That's not enough. So you cannot have a global development bank with only 10 countries as members. So the NDB has to expand. And as the NDB expand, they have to reform from the inside, meaning reform their statutes, which are linked to the US dollar. So if you have a Global South Development Bank issuing loans for development projects across the Global South, this cannot be tied to the US dollar. It's plainly obvious. But that's there's the rub. You have to start upgrading the bank from the get-go, from the inside, practically from scratch. But at least this process is ongoing already. So every time that I give an example to you, Danny, to all of you, I think you might be wondering, but it gets more and more complicated. Yes, it does. It does. But even as it gets more and more complicated in each node of the BRICS machine, you see that progress is ongoing in every area. And this is something that at least the expectations that we had before the summit in Rio, they were reversed because we could see progress in every area, and especially these parallel areas: business, women's councils, civics, discussion about media, you name it. What the Chinese call the 5 BRICS pillars, which includes the famous Xi Jinping style peoples to peoples exchanges. And this is something we could see live in Rio, you know, the pulse of the global south and people exchanging ideas, projects. Okay, let's look for sources of financing here, there, etc. So that's where the role of the NDB tends to grow from now on. And it will depend a lot on President Dilma Rousseff's I would say political capital. She's highly admired by Xi Jinping and by Putin at the same time. So now this has to transfer into actual policies. But it's going to be tough. Very, very tough.
When we look at Iran, China, and Russia, the real RIC or the new RIC, all three of them are sanctioned countries. Iran with some of the harshest sanctions given their geographic location. Russia with the most sanctions from the US and EU. And then, of course, China has sanctions on it in various sectors by the United States. So how do these three countries, essentially sanctioned in significant ways, how do they lead this charge? How is it happening? Because as we played earlier with Lindsey Graham, despite his lies, his obfuscation, his messengering for the ruling classes, he is speaking to a fear, it seems like, and maybe even an underestimation of what these three countries have been able to accomplish despite all of the adversity and the aggression against them.
They cannot point these countries on a map. Sorry for being so undiplomatic, but you know, it gets on your nerves sometimes. It doesn't matter. And this is something very important among these three. They stop paying attention to the US or whatever vociferation or threats or whatever coming to the US. The Russians are doing what they're doing. They will keep doing what they're doing on Ukraine and on the, let's say, road to de-dollarization front. China, as I saw when Trump unleashed the tariffs, and I was in Shanghai at the time, and I could sense, I could feel it, and I could see in front of my interlocutors, talking to them, this renewed sense of self-confidence. They say, okay, you want war? Okay, we're ready for any war you want to bring it on. And the Brazilians, which now probably going to be, in a matter of a few days, probably they're going to start to be sanctioned again. Tariffs are sanctions. In fact, it's the only policy from DC. They are finding again a sense of national unity, which is something that had disappeared from Brazil, especially because Brazil is so polarized between Lula and what Lula represents and Bolsonarismo, which is still very, very strong. And I had some crash course on how strong Bolsonarismo is still very, very powerful in Brazil. So the country is split. But now, with a foreign attack on Brazilian sovereignty, that's great. From the point of view of a country recovering its sovereignty, it's a gift. Trump has given Brazil a gift, in fact. So this is how you, as a BRICS nation on different levels, this is how you coordinate with the others. So soon we're going to have maybe 4 of the top BRICS under different kinds of sanctions and different kinds of hybrid, hot trade, tariff, geoeconomic, geopolitical war. And the others are learning, of course. And the partners are also learning. For instance, the Southeast Asians, which are a powerhouse in themselves. Indonesia as a full member. and Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand as partners. They are learning that sooner or later, the US can turn against them as well, especially when they know that their main trade partner is China for all ASEAN 10, and Russia has enormous soft power with ASEAN, and Russia is making inroads, geoeconomic inroads in ASEAN as well. So sooner or later, ASEAN is going to become a target. That's absolutely never. It's the kind of conversation that I have with my Thai friends when I am in Thailand. Same thing. So this interaction, Brazil, Southeast Asia, soon at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, will be essential as well. They will be learning from each other. And the role of Indonesia, which Indonesia is like the Brazil of Southeast Asia, the largest economy, significant, strategic, etc. Brazil and Indonesia, they are getting closer and closer as well because they see their similarities in different parts of the world. So the level of integration among all the major BRICS partners is fascinating to watch. It's something that is happening on an everyday basis. And now that they are virtually all of them under attack, directly and indirectly, once again, the high-speed rail will start picking up speed.
What's so interesting, too, is how this RIC, Russia, China, Iran, they've been able to overcome so much despite all the pressure, adversity, aggression against them. And then, as you said, there are these emerging countries, Indonesia, the admission into BRICS, a full member, a huge development, as you noted. And then just after, I want your comment on this, just after the BRICS summit, we have another partner country, Vietnam. And Vietnam's a huge cog in the U.S.'s hope to isolate China. And here you have now Vietnam and China
joint army drills,
military drills, which is shocking in many ways, given the fact that the last war that either China or Vietnam fought was against each other over 40 years ago. And yet, despite the bad blood that they've had between each other, they've gotten closer and closer. And this kind of speaks to a development I want you to speak to, Pepe, which is, it seems like the more that the United States and its vassals and NATO, they try to place pressure, they try to achieve their objectives of ultimately regime changing the head of BRICS, the more it seems to backfires in ways that are very unexpected.
Absolutely. And what I outline in this column, this latest column that we referred to in the beginning of our conversation, these overlapping NATO wars. NATO is dragging itself and is being dragged itself into these three overlapping wars. And it's already part of at least two of these wars, and soon in the third. The third, by the way, which is the crucial war of the 21st century, is the US war against China. It's now being encompassed by NATO as a NATO war against China as well. And this was basically one of the key decisions of that absolutely ghastly NATO summit. By the way, was more or less almost simultaneous with the BRICS summit. The first decision is the war with Russia will continue like forever. No? And the second decision is we are preparing for a war against China. These are the two major decisions of a NATO summit. So the global South looks at it, they understand immediately the big picture. You don't even need to explain it. So these three overlapping wars. War number one, of course, is the war which used to be the war of the collective West against Russia, and may be metastasizing into just the NATO war against Russia, with the US leading from behind. That's where we are at the moment. Because the Trump 2.0 plan is, okay, you, NATO, all of you Europeans, 30 members, right? Plus US and Canada, so 30 European members of NATO. You want to go to war against Russia? Perfect. You buy every bloody weapon that we make from us. No problem. And then you go to war against Russia. We are not, and we will not be directly involved. Okay, this is theory. It can change tomorrow, as we all know. But basically, NATO will be paying to go to war against Russia, and the US will be profiting from NATO going to war against Russia, and everything will go downhill, as we already know, even before this whole thing gets to the next level. So the disaster is going to be for NATO and for Europe. So that's war number one. War number two, interlinked with war number one, is the American war in West Asia against Iran, which is also the Israeli war against Iran. So it's the war of the Zionist axis against the axis of resistance, and especially Iran. Okay, what does Trump 2.0 want from all that? A huge business scam. Israel at the center of a new business Middle East, or West Asia, which is the correct terminology, at the center of the connectivity corridor, which is bound to disappear, but for the moment it's still more or less moribund. The IMEC, Israel at the center, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates on the sides, and in the extremities, Europe and India. And that's one of the reasons that explains why India is still hedging their bets vis-a-vis BRICS, because some of the Indian elites still believe that IMEC one day will happen. Not with a genocide in Gaza, by the way. Anyway, this is what Trump wants. So Israel is the lord of West Asia, becomes the geoeconomic trade corridor lord of West Asia as well, with connections with Europe and India. And all of that presided by Donald Trump, so he can make extra profits. And of course, with Gaza turned into whatever, Trump Riviera or whatever he can come up with, you know. So this is the plan, essentially. And war number three, the preparation for the war against China. So NATO not only are preparing for war against China, as they concluded in their summit in The Hague, but they are now at war with BRICS. And this was declared point blank by that stale piece of Gouda, Tutti Frutti All Ruti, passing as Secretary General of NATO, which makes us think that maybe Stoltenberg, that Norwegian piece of Norwegian wood, was not so stupid after all. So Tutti Frutti All Ruti, he declared that Brazil, India, and China, they better pick up the phone and talk to Putin. Otherwise, they're going to be sanctioned, and NATO is going against them. There you go. So this is the short breakdown of these three interlocked wars, which are NATO wars in every degree, the three of them, different degrees, but in every degree at least, and spells out a mix of total cognitive dissonance, cosmic stupidity, and a suicidal drive. Because anyone in Brussels, and when I say Brussels, is not only NATO headquarters, is the European Union and the European Commission in Brussels. This triad, there are some people who actually have a brain in this triad, but you know, basically they are just thinking about the retirement day with full pension, and then they can escape to live in Thailand by the beach, you know. But some of these people, they actually think, and they know that this is a no-go. And they know that they don't have the money to support this war. Can you imagine that the European Union is projecting, and NATO, basically both, because the European Union is the, let's say, the civilian arm of NATO, let's put it this way. They are projecting a military budget of 1 trillion euros a year all the way to 2030. How they're going to finance that? They can't. They don't have that money. They're going to have to go to banks once again, and they will never be able to repay it. Even if they steal Russian assets, won't be enough to repay that. You know. So who's going to pay for that in the long run? 450 million European citizens, voters, taxpayers. I would say that less than 1% as it stands, already see what's coming. When we have 10 or 20% aware of what's coming, expect upside downs all across the EU. We're not there yet. What we have is the NATO deadline, which is we want a war against Russia in 2030. So this implies provocation after provocation. This implies the opening of several new fronts, some of them already open. The South Caucasus is a new front against Russia already opening, instrumentalizing Azerbaijan, which is also playing a double game. MI6 renewed drive to regiment Salafi jihadi online terrorists all across Central Asia. This is already on. Of course, the Baltic. There is this new Iron Curtain, the 3 Baltic Chihuahuas, Poland and Finland, already on, being built as we speak. So when we put this all together, the Russians look at these movements in the chessboard, and they have to be ready to all of that at the same time.